Sup shitters, my name is Logan aka Spider Hands and welcome to SP Tutorials, where today we're going to be talking about how I stream and record stuff. Because I think it's really important to talk about that, especially the fact that I think sort of recording and streaming is still growing. People are still kind of getting into it. They're kind of still really digging the vibe of being able to play video games and talk to people. It's lots of fun. I'm gonna sort of give you a little video tour of my home studio, or one of the studios I have, because I have a couple. I have like a lesson studio and then I have like a sort of production studio. I'm gonna talk about some things I have there that are helpful, and also I'm gonna talk about some things I want to improve, because I think it's very important to continue trying to improve. You can't have things too perfect. Let's get into it. For this one, I'm gonna sort of be doing the visual tour first of my setup, because I think that's very important to talk about. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can zoom out a little bit. Can I? Yeah, I've got a wide view. So this is probably not gonna be in the same quality because I'm using my phone's camera. Basically, my studio, I have like keyboards, like there's a synth down the bottom, and there's those headphones down there are noise cancelling ones. They're pretty dope. Use them if you're streaming so that you don't get bothered by outside noises. Then I've got like a keyboard that I use to practice whenever I'm rendering videos. I can play some piano. You know, I've got Claire de Lune at the moment, notation there, and I've got sort of like a guitar amp over there, a stack guitar amp that I can use whenever I want, a couple of posters, and a ukulele as well. It's quite nice. In this part of the room, I have my custom PC that I built, and I've also got like over there's an external hard drive, and then there's also a Wi-Fi USB, and then there's also a resource monitor on my computer via one of my cell phones, and then I've got myself an audio capture volume thingy for my Soundcard on my custom PC, and then I've got an Xbox controller, and then something to put a coffee cup on so that I don't burn my desk. Going to this part here, we have ourselves KRK monitors. I've got 2 of those. I've also got myself a Blue Yeti microphone, and then I've also got a Razer Kaio webcam with 7020p 60, plus I've also got a 1440p 144Hz monitor that I have at 120. Make sure that you capture footage at a multiple of 60, because if you try and record something at 144 and render it down to 60 Hz, whether you're streaming or you're recording, it's going to be an absolute crap show. Very, very stock standard keyboard and mouse. I have some speakers as well. Here, some very basic speakers. And then here I just have a secondary monitor. I have a light to sort of illuminate my face if need be. And I've got some audio hardware down here. Just stuff that sort of handles guitar, bass recording. I've also got a Roland Studio Capture that I put my mic through. You can see there I've actually got a Rode NR1-A Mic that has a mouth guard there and sort of a plosive guard, and it's connected via an XLR cable that basically goes right into there. I mean, I used my Yeti for a while when I started doing these Let's Plays, but it records in 16-bit, and when you're doing audio recordings, you kind of want to make sure that you're recording in as best a higher the sample rate or the higher the bit rate as possible for your platform, especially because if your like initial recording is crap, once YouTube or Twitch starts lowering the kind of restricting the quality to be able to sort of maintain stream standards or limitations that they put in place, especially for beginner streamers, you don't want to have the initial vocal recording sound like garbage. And there's not really much else to talk about here. I don't really use these studio monitors for sort of record, streaming or anything like that. It's usually just these. I mean, I have a whole lot of other musical stuff here, like drum bags and all that, and I have like back here I have like a tripod that I was doing my video course on. There's a dish. This is a lot of this is basically a multi-purpose place, and I've also got my guitars back here and all that, and posters and all that kind of stuff. But the most important things where you're streaming are basically having a good computer, and this one has like a 3900X in it, a 12-core processor, like a really good CPU. It has a GTX 1080 in it because I broke my 2080 whilst trying to water cool it, and it's not ideal. Make sure you get the correct instructions when you're water cooling a $1,500 graphics card at the time, but that's besides the point. The 1080 does fine. I'm able to stream with the 1080. I use a Shadowplay as well as recording via CPU and OBS, so it's fine. That's basically it. I don't think there's anything else. Having a secondary monitor when you're streaming is fine. That's really helpful actually. And having the lights set up, the combination of this plus my nanoleaf panels, and you know, plus my you know, plus that's enough light most of the time to keep me going, keep things illuminated, especially if you're in a dark room and you want to sort of not have too much yellow. I mean, you can kind of, the beauty of a nanoleaf panel is that you can kind of avoid having too much of a certain sort of color by changing the color of the nanoleaf panels to illuminate the whole room. But we'll get that's an expensive solution. Like, I've spent quite a bit of money on lighting alone. For people starting out, just make sure you've got enough light in your room so that you don't kind of have shadows over your face. You don't look like you're trying to do a horror film or something like that. But as long as you've got a decent sort of mic, like this guy here, that guy here is a decent mic. He's a beginner's mic. A lot of people will have like these black SM7B mics that are dynamics, and they're a bit more expensive. They're really good though, they're just not that common. They got bought up a lot in the lockdowns because people needed to sort of do stuff from home and they couldn't go to work, so that's why they're probably a bit more common now. I would recommend getting an NT1 if you can't afford this. You don't need to go for a Yeti. I have it simply because it's a good backup, but I would recommend getting a nice condenser mic like this guy that you can plug in by XLR to like a very simple sound card. You don't really need that one down there. You know, I know it's a mess of cables, don't judge me. I also have a $1,000 camera on the floor. I'll fix that in a moment. I have some studio headphones as well here. You don't need this much. The trick is you don't really need this much to be able to stream well. You can get by on like you can get by with just a webcam and, you know, a display capture and a PC with like 8 cores and a sort of semi-decent, semi-recent Soundcard, Pascal or later. It's just basically if your computer can run games, typically you're able to play them. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that if you are sitting there thinking you can't do something and you haven't tried it, is to have a go at it anyways. Just don't cheap out on your microphone, alright? You need good quality microphones, okay? What else we got? Basically, if you've got a decent PC, you've got a decent microphone, you've got a decent sound card, so get something that you can plug a mic cable into. I'll link them in here. I'll probably link things as I do this video just so that it's not too vague. You want to download OBS and use the auto configuration wizard and just run that, and it'll scope out the specs of your PC and you'll be able to then hopefully stream or record the way you want. You know, there are lots of different ways to sort of record, you know, for gameplay. There's lots of videos about how to record gameplay. There's no right or wrong way specifically to do it, as long as you're using something to record the actual footage that you can see yourself through. Like, the cool thing with OBS is that I've got my microphone here. You know, I've got my microphone here. I can go to properties and see that it's the studio capture, which is where my mic is plugged into. And the cool thing about the studio capture I have is that it actually auto calculates the amount of gain I need based on how I talk when I press the... It has an algorithm in there that I press and it calculates it for me. I don't need to worry about setting the gain. It's really clever stuff, man. You can add filters to it, but if you've got a decent microphone, you probably won't really need to add too many. You know, a couple of tips with OBS is to make sure that you set it in administration only. So like if you click it, you know, to open it, you want to make sure that when you open OBS Studio, it asks you to run it as administrator. So just always run OBS as an administrator by like right clicking and run as administrator, you know? The other thing is hide the preview when you're not like needing to look at yourself, because it really sucks when the computer is trying to render something that you don't need it to render, especially if you're like playing a video game and you don't need to see this when you're playing a video game, you're looking at the video game, right? So basically right click and just go enable preview and it'll hide it, or if you want to see it again. And I'd recommend every time you stream, just double check what things you can see. You can see down here I've got like eyes and closed eyes. I have several things I use depending on what I'm doing, whether I'm doing sort of music reviews or doing streaming. So like for instance, streams, they tend to look like this. And so if I have display capture here, this is what I use for streaming, and then this one here is what I use for display. And so what I kind of need to do is with the Razer Kaio specifically is make sure I go to this. You know, if you how do I do this? If you right click here, See what I mean? It's suddenly gone really crappy. You need to right click it, go to properties, configure video, camera control, low light compensation, boom, and it's back to normal. It's a problem I had for a very long time, and it just sucks. But when you have a webcam, it most likely might not be running at 60, because the reason for this is because it's trying to figure out the amount of light it needs to be able to get you looking good, and it accounts for that at the expense of your frame rate. If you remove the need for it to get rid of the low light compensation, then you're going to be basically fine. And it'll run at 60 FPS, which is important, because if your gameplay is at 60 FPS, but if your microphone or if your webcam is at 30, there's going to be a disconnect. It's going to be very noticeable. But if you've got like a 3900X kind of 812 core processor, you know, Intel processors are fine for it. So, yeah, I wouldn't recommend anything less than 6 cores. If you're running a one PC rig like I am, go for 8 or more, 3000 series Ryzen or later. I wouldn't recommend trying to stream through a laptop, because laptops get very, very hot, and when laptops get hot, they start to have a bit of a tantrum, and you can run into some issues with your performance, and it might affect the way you stream. It will affect the frame rate of your games. I'd recommend, if you're going to stream, you use an actual desktop PC. If you're desperate to stream with a laptop, get a secondary kind of device you can output the HDMI or whatever to, so that it can capture it and stream it. So that's like a 2 PC setup, and that can also be a thing if you've got like a desktop that just isn't, that you just want to have the best possible experience with. You can then output via your graphics card to that secondary PC for it to stream, and you basically would have to install OBS on the secondary computer so that it could behave itself and so that it could run. What else? What else is there that I need to say about this? You've kind of got your all right, 32 gigs of RAM as well. Make sure you have 32 gigs of RAM so that you can do video editing as well. It's one thing to have, you know, a decent amount, 812 cores and a decent like clock rate, so like 4 gigs or above. It's another thing to not have enough RAM to be able to run games and also sort of do recording or streaming. Make sure you got 32 gigs to sort of account for any video editing you might do. So I'm kind of talking about more of a multi-purpose kind of streaming, recording, production PC, as opposed to just streaming, because there are separate use cases, and I'm trying to cover both. You know, you don't need if you've got a secondary PC that's just taking in the footage and then kind of going, oh, I'll just upload it, it's not necessarily going to be as taxing as having everything done on one PC. So you might not need 32 gigs across both of the PCs, but in a one PC setup, get 32 gigs of RAM. And just with this here, I'm using Shadowplay as well as this, so that I can kind of record. I've just realized I haven't turned Shadowplay on. There we go. So now I'm recording via Shadowplay, which is really dumb. And I should have checked this beforehand, but this is how I roll. If you have NVIDIA GeForce Experience, you can right click that, go to that, and then boom, that's all there. Just click in game overlay, and then you're sorted. And that can record 2 sets of audio at the same time. Luckily, I'm recording the audio within OBS, so there shouldn't be an issue, but I have the choice of audio this way. What else do I want to say? Is there anything else I really need to say about this? If you're streaming, right, make sure, and I know this is device not connected, it's because I don't have my headphones on at the moment. Make sure your video output is like 1080p or below. Most people will not be able to sort of stream or record above 1080p with their computers. My base canvas is 2560, but my output is 1920, because that's what a lot of sort of streaming services prefer, and it's what a lot of people can sort of view on their internet connections. Common FPS values, make sure it's 60. And make sure again when you're playing a video game, it's not just about having your monitor at a multiple of 60. It's about making sure your game is at a multiple of 60 as well, because if you're say you've got a 120 hertz monitor, but you're playing 144 on Overwatch or something like that, your computer's going to be running frames it doesn't need to through your PC, and especially if you're trying to render that at 60, it just gets very confusing. Make sure that if you're playing Overwatch, make sure both your screen or any other game that allows for 120 FPS or 120 hertz, make sure that you are running it at a multiple of 60. So the game would be at 120, the screen would be 120. Your capture software like OBS would be 60. And I guess as well with GeForce Experience, I don't know if you can see this at the moment. I'm wondering if you can. I'm hoping you kind of can. You might not be able to, we'll find out. But video capture, you can see here I've set it at 60 FPS and a 1080p. Same as OBS. Everything needs to be a 1080p, everything needs to be a 60. Just don't screw with it. If your computer can't handle 1080p, just go to 720p 60. Just go to 1280 by 720. That's it. I think if you've got a decent mic, if you've got decent headphones, if you've set everything up correctly, and I mean here again, just with the audio, you can see here desktop audio. That would be what you're listening to. The mic auxiliary would be what you're speaking through, and the monitoring device here, it's just double checking that if you're monitoring anything, like say you're monitoring certain channels here specifically, it would go through your headphones. I don't think there's anything else. No, just make sure that your desktop audio, if you're not wanting to hear the audio, is off. You can click this here to turn it off or on. And you're gonna have to do some testing when you stream so that your desktop audio or your audio from your video game that you're playing, like if it's an Elgato thing via the Switch or whatever, you're gonna need to make sure that you test out the volumes of it so that when you do a stream, you don't sound very quiet in comparison to the music or the game audio or vice versa, because that can sort of sound unprofessional. Unless you're like me, in which case I forget to turn the game audio on at all. But anyways, that's it. That's basically my setup, the stuff I use to record. Very chilled out basic stuff. This is the most important stuff I can remember. Stay cool. Hopefully it's been helpful. See you later, and Spider hands out.